So I think the news conference is probably going to come this morning before the bill is actually finally passed. So the implication of that is it's going to be one of those, do not frustrate this. The people are behind me. Don't prevent this from going through. A bit of tough talking, a bit of politics. The bigger question, though, is more difficult to answer because I think for the Tories, Rwanda has become an election-winning sort of totem. It's become a way to soothe the right wing. It's become a thorn in Labour's side. It's become all of these things to a party that is desperately searching for really difficult answers. And the reality is that because it's so difficult, Rwanda is never going to answer them. And people are concerned about immigration, but they're also concerned about the way immigration impacts their lives, which is, whether or not they feel they can get a GP appointment or housing. And whether those things are immigration related or not, that's how they have often become tied. So will the Rwanda policy help with those very practical questions? No. Will it help people feel the government is controlling immigration, which polls suggest people want? Possibly yes, but not for everybody.
Rwanda ping pong could end with a late night smash. Let's talk to Kate McCann, Times Radio's political editor. Kate, I'm not going to blame you if the Rwanda thing is, we have to talk about it next week, but there is presumably a moment where this is coming to an end, and there's a whiff of a news conference in the air. Does that mean that we are getting near the end of this ping pong?
Yeah, it will end today, I think. And the Prime Minister has said very clearly, Asma's cheering in the studio.
I really am.
Well, the conversation about it won't end, though, because it will probably take at least another 6 weeks before we start to see flights. But today, what we expect to happen will be that this goes back and forth. Probably, look, it's very difficult to say how many times it could go back and forth. The Lords are likely to keep suggesting that they want to see protections, particularly for those who worked for the British government in Afghanistan. They don't think that those protections are there at the moment, but they will ultimately hold their hands up and say we are not elected, and the Commons has a majority.
So what's the good of this? Because you can make the case that the theatre takes over, because if the government is not going to change its mind, this has just been a colossal waste of time, because they've said change it, no, change it, no, change it, no, and at some point they're going to say, okay, we're going to give up.
So the Lords don't see it that way. The way they see it is that their responsibility is to slow this process down, to make sure that everybody really thinks about the implications of a big change in the law. And from their perspective, that they are saying, look, we've gone through it. We added all these amendments the first time around because we really don't like it. We don't like it on all these reasons. But look, we hear you. You're not going to listen to us on those. So there are two things left that we really feel that you have to listen to us on. And one of them is that there is an independent way of judging whether Rwanda is a safe country, not just someone, suggesting it is. And the other one is this protection for Afghan interpreters largely, but also those who work alongside the UK. But ultimately, they can't force the Commons to do that. All they can do is say, we've looked at it and we really think you need to reconsider. And today we'll reach the point where they say, OK, we've given you the chance and you haven't.
And the point is they haven't made them think, because the whip system still prevails, doesn't it? So it's not like the government has then sat around and said, oh, let's mull over all the nuances. If they said, this is our bill and we're going to whip a majority of Conservative MPs to vote for it.
Well,
and so that's actually what's happened.
So that is what the outcome will be. I think on the Afghan point, though, they have made people think about what the implications of this are. I was talking to someone yesterday who used to be really heavily involved in this process, the process of approving visas. And they were saying to me, the problem isn't as big as you think it is, and it is completely solvable. And now the government is aware of it. It knows that it's going to be flagged if, for example, somebody is put on a flight to Rwanda who has helped in Afghanistan. So they are very aware of it, and they are going to try and make sure that doesn't happen. So although ultimately they will get it through as they hoped, that doesn't mean that they haven't thought about it.
Okay, that's a very fair point. Now, Rishi Sunak's holding a news conference this morning about Rwanda.
Yes.
Which does lead us to this question, that if he gives a news conference trumpeting the Rwanda policy finally going through, after all of this effort, all of this time, all of this political capital, will it do him any good? Because presumably someone is in his ear saying, do you know what you need to do? You need to go off and talk about how you're making Rwanda happen, because there's a whole bunch of people who are going to get excited by that.
So I think the news conference is probably going to come this morning before the bill is actually finally passed. So the implication of that is it's going to be one of those, do not frustrate this. The people are behind me. Don't prevent this from going through. A bit of tough talking, a bit of politics. The bigger question, though, is more difficult to answer because I think for the Tories, Rwanda has become an election-winning sort of totem. It's become a way to soothe the right wing. It's become a thorn in Labour's side. It's become all of these things to a party that is desperately searching for really difficult answers. And the reality is that because it's so difficult, Rwanda is never going to answer them. And people are concerned about immigration, but they're also concerned about the way immigration impacts their lives, which is, you know, whether or not they feel they can get a GP appointment or housing. And whether those things are immigration related or not, that's how they have often become tied. So will the Rwanda policy help with those very practical questions? No. Will it help people feel the government is controlling immigration, which polls suggest people want? Possibly yes, but not for everybody. But remember, Rishi Sunak, when he was Chancellor, raised all of these questions himself. It's expensive. I don't think we're going to be able to send as many people as you think we will. And, you know, there are going to be big questions about whether it's actually going to act as a deterrent. Those things, apparently, we understand, he raised when he was the Chancellor. And those things are also what worry the public in some part.
And there's no polling, is there? There's no, because it feels like there must be some polling that the Tories are seeing that this is a great silver bullet that's going to help them.
Well, there is polling that says, there's polling that tracks what people care about most in the country. And Rwanda, well, immigration overall hasn't actually topped that poll since 2015, but it is also consistently in the top three. Yeah. So things like immigration, you know, housing, cost of living, they are all up there all the time. So there is evidence to suggest that people care about it. I think the bigger question is what do people want out of immigration policy? And actually, when you ask that question, it becomes much more nuanced, because if you say, would you like to see more nurses come from abroad? People say, yeah, well, that would help me get a doctor's appointment. That sounds great. So it's not a blanket nobody. It's much more about control. And that's why the Rwanda policy is what the Tories have seized on, because it seeks to stop people unfairly coming into the UK.
And the question is whether it's been worth all this.
Whether it'll work, yeah.
Yeah, and we shall see over the weeks to come. Kate, great to speak to you as ever. Thank you so much. That's Kate McCann, Times Radio's political editor.
The House of Commons has spoken. The Conservative Party has come together. The Rwanda bill has passed. It's now time for the Lords to pass this bill too. This is an urgent national priority. The treaty with Rwanda is signed, and the legislation which deems Rwanda a safe country has been passed unamended in our elected chamber. There is now only one question. Will the opposition in the appointed House of Lords try and frustrate the will of the people as expressed by the elected House, or will they get on board and do the right thing? It's as simple as that. We have a plan, and the plan is working. Last year was the first year the number of small boat arrivals went down. Not just down by a bit, down by a third compared to crossings in the year before. And that's in the context of arrivals being up 80% in Europe over the same period. But to really solve this problem, we need a clear and effective deterrent, so that people know that if they come here illegally, they will be detained and swiftly removed. That's what this Rwanda bill delivers. With all their efforts to block this bill, the Labour Party have shown that they simply don't get it. Their priority is not stopping the boats, but stopping the planes removing people who have no right to be here. They may talk the talk, but they have no plan. If they were in charge, there would be no treaty, no bill. 12 months of progress would be squandered. It would take us back to square one. And I can tell you this for certain, small boat arrivals would go back up. It would mean giving a green light to criminal gangs of people smugglers, that they can keep their deplorable, illegal trade going. It would mean spending millions more every day housing illegal migrants in hotels in our communities. And it would mean more people are likely to lose their lives by tragically drowning in the Channel. That's the consequence of having no plan. That's why we have to stick to our plan. That's why the House of Lords must pass this bill. It's time to take back control of our borders and defeat the people smugglers. It's time to restore people's trust that the system is fair. We are making progress to stop the boats, but now it's past time to start the flights.